guys, this is Thanatos here, right? I'm gonna be showing you some of the warframes in Conclave and how they work, because I messed up in my last video that I made about it. So, first up, let's go with Wisp, right? Can't use her, so not really a point talking about her. Ash, you can use his 1 to do damage to your targets, but you have to have your reticle over them, right? It does damage if, quite a bit of damage if your target's at health, right? Obviously, because it does slash damage. His 2 makes him invisible, lets him run a lot faster, or movement a lot faster in general. And if you have the augment, it'll make their screen white and it'll act like a flashbang in other games. His 3, he can teleport away from a bad situation, and mind you, you do not have to have a health orb, or not health orb, you do not have to have a target that has a health bar to teleport to. His Blade Storm is really strong. It does a lot of damage. If your opponent has full shields, it'll deal damage to the point where they have low shields and all their health. But if they have low shields and all their health, it'll one-shot them. So he's really good. Next is one of the ones I've been using a lot is Atlas. Atlas, he cannot be knocked down while on the ground, but if he's in the air, he can be knocked down. His landslide, if you hit them 3 times, will do damage and knock your opponent down. If you only hit them once, it'll impair them, so they won't be able to really jump. They'll be able to slide and roll and stuff, but they won't be able to jump. Tectonics has this wall, right? And if you activate it again, it'll send a boulder out. And it'll do damage, and it will knock people down if they get hit by it. Next is Petrify. Petrify, well, it really doesn't allow you to do much because the Petrify doesn't last for that long. It freezes them and stuff, but it doesn't last that long. Next is Rumblers. Depending on which kind of Atlas you're running, Rumblers can do one of 2 things. It can either freeze your in both forms it freezes them, but it'll send your minions out like how it does in PvE, freeze your enemies for like 30 seconds just so that you can do whatever you want to them. You can teabag the ground to mock them, you can shoot them in the face with a snipe charm a couple times to kill them, you can use an auto to kill them, you can do that sort of thing. Or you can have the Rumbler attachment, or not attachment, Rumbler augment, and you will become the Rumblers yourself. Right, you'll have these rocks on you, you can throw the rocks off of you to hit enemies, knocking them down, dealing damage and impairing them. Or you can push, I think it's circle. You can push circle to ground slam the ground, knocking them down and dealing damage. That's really it. Her sonar will reveal enemies and increase damage in certain spots. But like I said in my last Conclave guide, this isn't worth it in my opinion. Her silence still is the same. It will deactivate abilities, and it will not allow people to use abilities. Her Soundquake has a short range, does insanely high amounts of damage, so if someone's following you, you just use this, and if they walk into your area, they're dead, just because of how much damage it does. Now her passive works in Conclave. Like if you're running around with a Bratton or something that doesn't have a suppressor, or that's not a Daiku or a bow, then her weapons will not show up on a minimap. Or her gunfire will not show up on a minimap. Baruch you cannot use in Conclave, not even worth going over. Chroma, I was completely wrong about Chroma in my last video. All of his abilities are really good. His Spectral Screen with Ice, Toxic, Fire, and Shock do different things. His Ice will slow people down like a Frost proc, right? And if you keep them on your target, it will continue to slow them down and do a lot of damage. His Fire will only burn your target, so if you're using Fire, that's not really a point to use this ability. His Toxic will go straight to health, but if your opponents are running around with Nidus or Inaros, it's not worth using. The Shock, I haven't even used in Conclave, so I couldn't tell you. His Elemental Ward is really good. It doesn't matter on which element you're using, it's really good regardless. Because this one, if you're getting meleeed by somebody, it doesn't matter what melee it is, they'll kill themselves. If they do enough damage to you, they will kill themselves. Next is Vex Armor. Vex Armor is really good because if you take shield damage, the more armor you gain, the more health damage you take, the more damage you will do to your enemy. So if you have a sniper rifle, eventually you will be able to one-shot people if you take enough damage. Or if you have a fully auto like a Baza or a Karak, you will be able to two-shot people with an automatic weapon, which is really dumb, but you can do it. Effigy does the same thing that I said before. His ice will just do a lot of damage, and just Effigy in general is just a dangerous ability to be around. So if you see a Chroma use Effigy, get out of the way. Next is Ember. Ember is actually still good. Her 1 does impact damage and fire damage. If your targets are not dead, then your targets will burn. Her accelerant will stun targets, like do a stagger to them, and will increase fire damage like Fireball or Fire Blast to them. But that's really it. There's nothing really else to it. Fire Blast does a lot of damage. It has an AoE effect. It has a big range, and if they don't get hit by the AoE, they'll get hit by the fire lingering around. So they don't die by one thing, they're gonna die by the other. Wood on Fire, I used a long time ago, and if I do use Ember, I occasionally use it. It's still pretty good. If you're near your enemies will just burn to death. If they don't run away, then they're going to die. It's that simple. That's Ember. She's really good. Equinox, I'm a little bit more knowledgeable about, but I'm still kind of a noob. Her night form gains shields when you use her 1. Her day form gives you damage when you switch forms. That's really it to that one. Rest and Rage, if you're in the dress look, you can put people to sleep. If you're in that look that's showing up on screen now, then you will do more damage to that target. Pacify and Provoke. Night form reduces damage inflicted by nearby enemies, which I guess is okay, but for 75 energy, it's not worth it. Or in day form, increases ability strength, which is really not worth it in Conclave at all. Mend and Maim, don't even bother. So honestly, in my opinion, the only 2 abilities are 1 and 2 that you want to use with her, because Mend and Maim, it just doesn't do enough damage, and most of the time you're going to be in Conclave by yourself, so you're not really going to be playing on a team, unless if you're Ribian. But then again, Ribian's group, they use other characters. They do not even use Equinox at all. So that's Equinox. She's mediocre in my opinion. Excalibur used to be one of my favorites. He's alright, but he's not up there anymore. His slash dash will stagger enemy or impair enemies, so they can't bullet jump away. They can still roll and slide, but they cannot bullet jump away. It'll do damage as well, but not very much. His Radial Blind will blind enemies. Their screen will go white, but it's just for a second. It's just enough time for you to get out of a situation. That's really it. His Radial Javelin, they nerfed it a while ago. It doesn't do what it used to do. His Radial Javelin used to be able to completely squad wipe entire areas, even if you weren't in the line of sight. That doesn't really work anymore, so that ability is really meh. His Exalted Blade is still really good, but it's not as good as before. In my other video, you can't like one-shot air swipe people with the thingy anymore, so that's a bummer, but you know, whatever. There's other characters out there that are good. His passive is still pretty good. It increases his damage with swords and increases his attacks as well. It increases his damage and his attack speed. He's still a solid choice, but in my opinion, he's fallen for me. Next is Frost. Frost still is the same to me. His 1 will freeze people, or a Frost proc. will deal a little bit of damage and will track, just like how Ember's Fireball will. His passive, if he gets struck or stricken or hit, or whatever you want to call it, with a melee weapon, they will get a frost proc. His Ice Wave will deal damage, and Ice Shards will come out of the ground, leaving a frost proc on them. Snow Globe, if your opponent is inside of it, he or they will get slowed down. Avalanche, if you use it, most of the time they're going to die. If they don't die, they'll be left with 10 health left or something like that. But if you're a good enough player, you're going to hunt that player down and you're going to kill them. If you use your 1 on your 3, your Snow Globe will explode, dealing damage and knocking enemies down. So that's Frost. He's a solid choice. Gara. Gara's good. I think... Nope. Her 1 is okay, but not nearly as good as other characters. Her 2, my opinion, just isn't worth it. Her 3 is like a Trinity Link. If your enemies shoot the little things around that are floating around you, or your enemies, they will kill themselves, just like how a Trinity Link will work. Her glass wall thing will freeze enemies if you get close enough to them. But in my opinion, in my opinion, she's not very good. There's other characters out there that can do her job better, like Atlas, for example. Garuda, can't use in Conclave, not worth going over. Haro, I was completely wrong about. His 1 is good, his 2 is good, and his ult is good. His 1 is good because it'll chain your enemies, and it will reduce their movement. All they can do is slide and roll. They can't bullet jump, they can't do none of that. So that's his 1. His pendants. Is it his pendants? Yeah, I think it's his pendants. His pendants, he will get rid of his shield if he has shield, and he will increase the fire rate of whatever weapon you're using. That's really the only benefit of it. So if you're using a Karak Wraith, it'll do a lot because the gun will shoot a lot faster. His ult, he'll be immune to damage for like a second, but then after that, his headshot damage will be increased by a lot. His 3 isn't worth it at all. You use energy to gain energy back, and in Conclave you're limited with energy, so this ability is practically useless. So that's Haro. He's good, but he's not as good as others. Hilderon, can't use in Conclave, not worth it. Hydroid, he's tanky for 1. His Tentacle Swarm, let's start. His Tempest Barrage will send water blast from the sky, kind of like an airstrike, dealing damage depending on how long you hold the button for. The longer you hold the button, the more energy it costs, but the more energy it costs, the more damage it does. His 2 is Tidal Surge. He'll do like a tsunami going towards your enemy, knocking them down and getting rid of the shield. Then they're open up for a attack, so like a sniper shot or a shotgun shot will normally finish them off. Undertow, he goes underneath into a puddle of water, immune to most damage. However, if your enemy does find where you're at with, let's say, a slide attack with an Akandi, you can be pulled out of that if they hit you. Tentacle Swarm will just bring up a bunch of tentacles, dealing a lot of damage if they slap you. His passive, slime attacks have a 50% chance to summon a tentacle for 15 seconds. And that's pretty much the same thing as his Tentacle Swarm. They'll flop around and slap you and deal high amounts of damage. Next is Inaros. Inaros was good, and he's better than before. His 1, you'll throw sand in face, right? So it's like how I said before, except it will do health damage and that's the main point. It will do health damage and block and blind them. If they have a lot of shield or if they have a lot of health, it won't do much. But if they have little health, like 10, 30 maybe, then you'll instantly kill them. His 2, if you hit your enemy with his 2, they won't be able to do anything. All they will be able to do is walk and run. That's it. No bullet jump, nothing. His 3 will knock enemies down and deal damage to enemies nearby. But you can still take damage while in Sandstorm, and it takes up a lot of energy. His ult is really tricky to use because it takes, health damage away from you. So just hide, use your ult, get a lot of your armor, run away, grab the health orbs, do it again until you're at 100, and then just repeat that process over and over again, and you'll be really, really hard to kill. Like 6, 7 Rubico shots might take you down, but that's insane because most of the time Rubico takes 3 shots to kill, sometimes 4. So that's Inaris. Inaris is really good. Next is Ivara. Pretty much the same as before. Her 1 and her 4 are her best abilities. Her 1 has Cloak Arrow, Encumbered Arrow, and Null Shield Arrow. Null Shield will take away their shields. Cloak Arrow does the same thing as it does in PvE. And Encumbered Arrow, they cannot move. All they can do is walk and run. That's it. Navigator used to be good, but not so much anymore. It's just really difficult to navigate things, in my opinion, and it doesn't do as much damage as what it used to. Prowl is useless, don't even bother with it. And Artemis Bow, well, if you use that, you can just one-shot most enemies and clear out lobbies, like how I said before in my last video. So that's Ivara. Next is Korra. Korra is just a troll character. Her 1 does damage and knocks people down if you hit them. Her 2 just does the same thing as Ivara's quiver or encumbered arrow, but it's more annoying to hit because it takes longer to activate. Her 3, the cat will attack for like 10 damage per strike, so that's not really useful. Her defense will take enemies' weapons away, but that's really it. And her heal will heal Korra, but it's not nearly as good as what it used to be. Granted, I'm kind of happy about that. Her ult, if you stay in her little ult thingy, it'll do damage over time, and that's really it. It won't drag the enemies or anything like how it does in PvE. It'll only deal damage over time. That's it. So that's Korra. She's kind of really weak now. Limbo is really annoying because of his passive and his 1. His passive, he rolls. If you use the roll button, he'll go into the rift, taking away your shields. But then if you use your banish on somebody before you go into the rift yourself, you can then go into the rift and one-shot people with snipers because they don't have any shield left. His stasis and rift surge aren't really worth it, but his cataclysm will do high amounts of damage if you hit people with it. It'll do a really high amount of damage and possibly one-shotting them if your opponent is squishy enough. So that's Limbo. He's just annoying. Loki's quick. His 1 is annoying because it'll have a decoy, or it'll be like a turret. It'll shoot whatever primary weapon you have. His invisibility, he'll go invisible. He'll be harder to see. He won't be nearly as effective as Ash's invisibility, but it's still good. His switch teleport impairs people, so it's a really good tactic to get away or to just kill somebody that moves around too much. His radio disarm will take energy away, will get rid of their weapons for a certain amount of time, and will deal, I think, shield damage and possibly knock them down. I think it knocks them down still. So that's Loki. Next is Mag. Mag got a huge nerf since last time. Her pull still impairs people, like how it did before. Her Magnetize has that bubble, but if you use the bubble, it'll reduce damage to your opponents. Pulverize will take away enemy shields and give you shields. Crush doesn't happen nearly as quick, so you can get away from it. So it's just like how it is in PvE, really slow, but if you get caught in it and you die, that's your own fault. So her passive is useful. Bullet jumping pulls nearby items for easy collection. That's really it. So she's pretty useful, honestly. She's not overpowered anymore, but she's useful. Mesa, her 1 is useful because the more enemies you shoot, the more it charges up, so the more powerful that next shot will be. Her shooting gallery will make enemies reload. Her shatter shield will make her more tanky. and her Peacemaker, if you use it right, can be a devastating trap, and you can just mow people down if you have decent aim. That's Mesa. She's really good. Mirage, her 1 will do the same thing in PvE, except it'll only last for like 2 seconds in Conclave. It's not really worth it in my opinion. Her 2 will trap items around the map. Ammo boxes will explode, energy will take energy from you instead of giving it to you, and health orbs will take health away from you rather than giving it to you. Her Eclipse will increase her damage in shadows and make her difficult to track. Standing in light will deal heavy amounts of damage, while in the shadows will make her difficult to track and even harder to hurt. So basically, in the light, she does more damage. In the dark, she's tankier. Her Prism will just spin around and deal damage, and if it explodes or if you detonate it, it'll blind people around you. That's Mirage. She's quite good. Necros, his 1 will knock people down. It's Terrify, not really worth it. I don't even know what it does. Desecrate is like wall hack. You'll be able to see your enemy through walls, but it's only 1 target at a time. Shadows of the Dead, he will only allows you to instantly respawn. That's it. So in Necros' case, only ability that's worth it is a Soul Punch. Next is Ninja. Ninja's annoying. Her 1 or his 1, whatever. His 1 has the little fire trail. Does a little bit of damage, but that's about it. Does a little bit of damage and speeds them up. Blazing Chakram, he'll throw it. It'll deal damage. It'll knock you down. I believe it also will have a burning ring around you as well. It'll get rid of your shield, so it's really easy to get kills after you hit somebody with it. Warding Halo will neglect damage for a certain amount of damage threshold, and then after that, you'll become invincible for like a second or 2. Divine Spears does a lot of damage if you hit somebody with them. If you don't, then you're dead because it takes a long time to cast. So that's Ninja. Next is Nidus. Nidus' 1 is really good for surviving, because that's what you need to survive in Conclave with Nidus. You use this, you can only have up to 3 stacks. You use this 3 times, you get 3 stacks, and the next thing you know, you have 4 health bars. His Larva impairs people if they get caught. His Link will, it's like a Trinity link. Your enemies will take damage if you're linked to somebody. His ult spawns these little maggot things that'll one-shot enemies and heal you. So yeah, this is quite aggravating to deal with. It's fun to play though. Nova, her passive is that if she gets knocked down, she knocks enemies down around her. Her 1 is called Null Star, does little amounts of damage, but it'll steal energy from your enemies. Antimatter Drop, if you use it right, you can just have this little ball thing like a mine, and it'll just blow up in your enemy's face, and it does quite a bit of damage. Wormhole is basically a teleport, useful in the right situations. Molecular Prime does the same thing as it does in PvE. It makes them slow, it increases your damage and all that good stuff. So it pretty much does the same thing as in PvE. It's a really good ability. Nova's awesome. Next is Nyx. Nyx is a bit more tricky. Her Mind Control controls your enemy for 4 seconds, staggering them. But if you do damage to them, they are put out of the control. Psychic Bolts, you have to aim just like how Ash's Shuriken, except that if you hit all of the bolts, it does a lot of damage and it can one-shot people. Chaos only staggers and allows enemies in team to kill each other. That's it. Her Absorb will absorb damage, and if you absorb enough, you can one-shot people with it, but that's really it. Next is Oberon. Oberon's 1 will do small amounts of damage. His Hallowed Ground, if your opponent walks on it or is near it, they will take damage over time. His Renewal will heal him and his allies around him. His Reckoning will pick people up, slam them down, do a lot of damage. They'll be left with like 15 health left, and then you can finish them off with a Bratton or something. Really easy. Next is Octavia. Octavia, I learned a little bit more about. I think it's her 3. No, it's not her 3, it's her 1. It's her 1 that will absorb damage and will deal damage if your targets are shooting at her ring. If they walk into it, they will get damage over time. I don't know what the other 3 abilities do. I really have no idea. I'm still a noob on Octavia. Next is Revenant. You can't use Revenant. Next is Rhino. His Iron Charge will deal damage, taking away a lot of shield, and we open up for an attack because they're knocked down. His Iron Skin disintegrates over time in the Conclave, but if you use it in the right areas, you can easily get away. His 3 increases his damage, but I think it's about like 2 times, so that's really useful. His Rhino Stomp will stomp, obviously, dealing a lot of damage and slowing them down immensely. Rhinos are really good for him for Conclave. I don't see enough of them. They are really, really good. Saren, I don't like Saren. Her spores will do small amounts of damage. Her molt will just eventually do damage if your enemy is inside your molt with you. It acts like a weaker version of Frost Bubble. Toxic Lash will increase your damage in the Conclave. Not really worth it in my opinion, just because of how little of a duration it has. And Miasma is probably the best ability that she has in Conclave, because it'll deal health damage, and it'll do a lot. If your enemy is if your enemy is not at full health, they will die. But if they are at full health, they'll be left at like 15 health, something like that. Saren, in my opinion, just isn't worth it. Next is Titania, another one that isn't worth it. Her 1 knocks people down. No, her 1 isn't that one. Her 1 will send people into the air, but they can't take damage while in the air, so I don't know. Her 2, what does her 2 even do? I don't know what her 2 does. Her 3 will, I think, knock people down and steal their weapons. It might be her 1. I don't know. Her ult, she becomes into this little tiny thing, and she can melee and shoot, and she's really annoying to hit. But in the Conclave, you don't really see her that much, so you don't really have to worry about her. She's not really worth it in my opinion. She's confusing to me. Next is Trinity. Trinity is 1, don't even bother. It'll just create a well of life on an enemy. Allies will gain health when damaging the target, but it'll increase your target's health. So it's not worth it. Energy Vampire will do what it does in PvE, except it doesn't really do much in there because it doesn't stun. Link will make the damage that you take go to them by a certain amount, and they will kill themselves if they have a high damage weapon. Blessing will heal yourself and you will gain armor. That's Trinity. It's really nothing really special about her in my opinion. Valkyrie is one of my favorites. Her 1 will ripline people and knock them down, dealing a small amount of damage. Her 2 will slow people down. She will slow everything down, their movement, their fire rate, their melee rate, everything. While I believe it increases your damage and your attack speed. No, your movement and your attack speed, or armor. I don't remember. Her Paralyze will only stagger, but it'll get rid of her shield, or impair, and then it'll get rid of her shield, so that's not really worth it. Hysteria, if you slide attack with Hysteria, it'll one-shot people. That's really all you really need to know with that. Her passive allows her to get knocked down. I almost forgot that. Vauban is just annoying because of his Teslas. You can place full power Teslas down and they'll do a lot of damage. His Mine Layer, he has 3 mines. He has Bounce, Trip Laser, Shred, and Concuss. Bounce will bounce your enemies. Trip Laser will knock your enemies down, and they will get a magnetic proc, which will, then they will only have 50 energy at that point. Shred is just like a regular mine, and Concuss is the same thing. That's really it. Bastille will slow enemies down by a lot, and that's really all that does. Vortex will knock enemies down, granting a magnetic proc to them, and will do constant damage over time. Volt's pretty good. Next is Volt. Volt's pretty good too. His 1 is like a finishing attack. It can go through walls, and it does electric damage, obviously. His 2 will speed him up, speed his movement speed up, speed his attack speed up, and it's a solid choice. Electric Shield, he gains electric damage. If he shoots through the shield, he can pick it up and run around with it. If you get close enough to somebody, you will knock people down, and you can easily kill people like that. His Discharge will do a lot of damage over time, but it doesn't one-shot people. So if there's a bunch of enemies in a fight, you use that, it'll kill all the enemies around there because most of them would be damaged. Volt's a really good choice, I just don't like Volt. Not my cup of tea. Wukong, because of his new rework, you can't use him in Conclave. Zephyr, the last frame we're going to talk about, is actually really good. Her 1 will allow her to get into the air, or if you're already in the air, do a dive bomb and knock people down and dealing damage. Airburst will throw like these little ball thingies at your enemies, dealing damage and knocking them down. Turbulence will not allow you to be hurt by gunfire. Tornadoes will spawn these giant tornadoes, knocking people down, dealing damage, and applying a proc to them, a magnetic proc to them. Her passive allows her to float in the air for longer, and I don't like that. Next, after all of that, I'm going to show you some of my characters and their mods that I use on them. Let's take a look at my Atlas build. This one is a Snipetron Viper Wraith Nikandi Atlas. The Atlas himself has Anticipation, Armored Recovery, Tempered Bound, Adrenaline Boost. This is experimental, by the way. I don't normally use it. Overcharge Detectors, Follow Through, and Surplus Diverters. Surplus Diverters allows you to regain 6 energy upon replenishing shields after they have deactivated. Follow Through, you respawn with 10 energy. Adrenaline Boost gives you 50 energy but minus 20% health. Overcharge Detectors allows you to detect enemies around you that have maximum energy. Tempered Bound lowers your mobility, but it increases your shield capacity. Anticipation, immune for knockdown for additional 4 seconds after being knocked down. Immune to stagger for an additional 4 seconds after being staggered. Armored Recovery, plus 50% damage resistance when knocked down, but minus 20% slide. This is a build I normally run with, except for Adrenaline Boost. That's just experimental on him right now. Next is my Snipetron. Snipetron Emergent Aftermath, Ripper Rounds, Twitch, Line Weight Rank 1, and Agile Aim. Agile Aim will allow me to move faster while aiming. Emergent Aftermath, on kill, reload 50% faster for 3 seconds. Ripper Rounds converted 20% damage into puncture. Twitch, I can holster my weapon a lot faster so I can get to my secondary. And Line Weight, plus 10% fire rate when crouching, and plus 50% recoil. Now there's other mods that you can put on here, like Apex Predator, which that's what I'm going to do now. And on hit, reveals targets on minimap for 6 seconds. So really useful. That's that. Next is going to be my Viper Wraith. Full capacity increases the magazine, but minuses the reload speed. Reflex Draw means I can switch from my melee to my primary and so forth. Eject Magazine means that it reloads itself while it's holstered. Next is going to be skull shots. I forgot to put that on there. Plus 25% ammo efficiency for 0.5 seconds. Obviously, I'm going to rank that up. I just forgot to do so. Next is spry sights. Does the same thing as agile aim does. It increases your movement speed while on the ground. Movement speed, sorry, while aiming, not on the ground. Night Stalker reveals targets on minimap for 6 seconds. So if you shoot somebody, you'll be able to see your target. Next is going to be Nakandi. Nakandi is one of my favorite melee weapons, because stand ground will you'll be able to block 60% damage from abilities. Explosive demise, dead bodies will explode, dealing a high amount of damage, sometimes one-shotting them. After that will be Relentless Assault. On kill, plus 2 energy rate for 4 seconds. That's really useful. Next is a Sword Alone, with melee equipped, plus 10% mobility, and plus 1.3 sprint speed. So that's really, really good. This is this build. Alright guys, I just told you one of my sniper builds. I'm going to go over some of my assault rifle builds. So this is where I normally thrive, and because of the nature of this, I'm going to show you my usual. So this is my regular build. There we go. Didn't have the right color scheme on. This is my regular build. Valkyr, Karak Wraith. That's a regular Furus. I just renamed it. And this is a Shaku. Or I can switch that out for an Nakandi, depending on how I feel. Alright, Karak Wraith. On this build, I have Comet Rounds. Convert a certain amount of damage to puncture, or to impact, sorry. Twitch, I can switch in between weapons a lot faster. Tactical Reload. If this weapon is holstered, the gun reloads itself. Maximum capacity increases the gun's magazine, but it minuses the reload speed. Def Tempo, on headshots I gain plus 10 mobility for 4 seconds. Gun Glide, it minuses recoil and spread while sliding. Agile Aim, it increases my movement speed while aiming. So that's always useful. On my Furus, I have Eject Magazine, which will reload itself if it's holstered. Reflex Draw will allow me to switch in between weapons a lot faster. Full Capacity will allow me to have more bullets in my gun. And Night Stalker. This one will allow me to see targets on the minimap, but obviously I don't have a caddy on here. So once I get that, I'm going to put this mod on here. Which what this does is that it allows me to move faster while I'm aiming. Next is, I already showed you guys this on the Nakandi in the last video, or in the last one, but let me show you again. Explosive Demise, bodies explode after they're dead, and deals a high amount of damage, possibly one-shotting them. Relentless Assault, plus 2 energy rate for 4 seconds. Sword Alone, with melee equipped, plus 10% mobility, and plus 1.3 sprint speed, really useful. Sprint Ground, or Stand Ground, sorry, blocking reduces damage taken by enemies' abilities by 60%. That's also really useful. Now, that's really it for this one. Next will be my gameplay. Out of here, bruh. Out of here. Kill's a kill. It's 2. Again. Decoy, alright. Get these guys on guard. that's for.
Follow behind you.
As you can see, I haven't used a single ability. This guy has already used at least 3. I got knocked down. That was my fault. Should have stood still. I get a lot of crap from the PlayStation community because I stand still a lot. Die too, okay. Missed. Another kill.
You have the most aura.
Now, I am not the best, nor do I say I'm the best. Get a lot of confusion with that. I do not claim that I am the best. I'm completely aware that there are other people out there who are better than me. I am mainly an Xbox player, and there's at least a couple people that I can name off that are better than me on there. Desiring Light is one. But he's a close friend, so I don't really have to worry about him. Okay. He wants to do that. Hey, my sniper class is coming back out.
You are leading the annihilation.
like Wolf Sledge is a meta on PlayStation. That's what it looks like.
You have the most aura. All others follow behind you. You are leading the annihilation.
You used the static core and you still died. Oh my god. You have to use a static core to get a kill. That just proves how bad you are.
You leave the path, Tenno. Tenno, you are in the lead.
Missing all my shots. This is kind of embarrassing.